Hello and welcome to MediaCom Transformation Week. This is the third time that Transformation Week has taken place, and we are delighted that this year it has still been able to go ahead, albeit virtually. Never before has the theme of transformation seemed more relevant, and we really hope that you are able to take some useful learnings away from this session today. Thank you for joining Hearst UK for this discussion. I'm Faye Turner, Group Strategy Director, and I'm going to be your host for this session as we discuss the incredibly important topic of sustainability, the environment, and eco-consciousness. Importantly, we'll be looking at this through the lens of our changed realities, discussing how COVID has reshaped the future of sustainability, as well as what it means for consumers and brands alike. I'm joined today by a highly esteemed and incredibly influential panel of editors from Hearst UK, who I'll introduce to you now. Gabby Huddart is the Group Editorial Director for Hearst Lifestyle and also Editor-in-Chief for Good Housekeeping, a brand that's been supporting audiences in their lives for nearly 100 years. Louise Pearce is Director of Content for the Homes portfolio at Hearst UK and Editor-in-Chief of House Beautiful and Country Living brands. The latter understandably attracts incredibly passionate countryside lovers who are an extremely receptive, eco-conscious audience. And Alice Wignall, who is the Executive Editor of Elle UK, the biggest selling fashion magazine brand in the world across its 45 territories. There's probably a lot of questions you'd love to ask this esteemed panel, so please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. If we don't have time to answer questions in this session, we will follow up afterwards. So let's start in 2019, when the world was a little less volatile. Environmental concern in 2019 was the year when YouGov announced it was at its highest record on level. And rightly so. It felt like momentum was building to tackle the climate and pollution challenges our generations are facing. But then COVID hit, and Google search data shows that from the first week in March to the week before the first UK lockdown, keyword searches that include the word sustainable dropped a huge 37% from what was a previous all-time peak. COVID, it's fair to say, was a more pressing threat that distracted attention. And sadly, it's been contributing to the mountains of single-use plastic we already consume. It is estimated that 194 billion additional single-use PPE, face masks and gloves are being used globally each month. Yet COVID hasn't been all bad. In an exclusive interview for Good Housekeeping in November's issue, the environmental campaigner and wildlife TV presenter Chris Packham noted that when lockdown hit, pollution levels dropped. The resulting improvement in air quality held huge benefits for our natural world. Across all of our coronavirus barometer studies at Hearst and our latest Positively 2021 research, it's clear that COVID has instigated significant reappraisal of consumers' lives, attitudes, and values, which people want to carry forward into 2021. For example, 71% are saying that they're not going to take anything for granted anymore, with that same amount noting that they have a revived appreciation for the outdoors and the environment that's around them. Plus, we're seeing notable shifts in people's attitudes towards responsibility and being a local, national, and even global citizen. For the majority of people, sustainability remains as important now, if not more critical than ever before. And they're looking to us at Hearst and you as brands to play a role in addressing environmental issues and helping them to do so too. But we know from our audience that crucially 80% of them need help with how they're using their spending power to buy more sustainably, with only 10% saying that they're totally or very satisfied with their current environmental footprint. So the consumer desire is there, and they're looking for your brands to lead the way, which is no doubt why you're probably joining this session today. At Hearst, we're playing our part, also reducing our waste, substituting plastic packaging, embarking on sustainable photo shoots and content production, as well as ensuring that we plant more trees than we utilise. This, we're proud to say, earned Hearst UK the international gold standard in environmental business management, the ISO 14001 certification in 2019. Plus, we're using our powerful brands, far-reaching platforms and influential voices to ensure that we connect with our audiences to support them on their individual eco journeys, curating and cutting through the noise to what truly matters and will have a real positive impact. So let's hear now from Gabby, Louise and Alice about how their brands are supporting their audiences to realise their sustainable ambitions. So let's dive into question one. Gabby, let's start with you first. It would be fantastic if you could, obviously despite the negativity that surrounds COVID, talk to how this pandemic has been a springboard for positive change.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Faye, and morning, everyone. I think it's fair to say a huge number of areas of life have been affected, as I'm sure most people on the call will have experienced as well. First, obviously, is the move of much of life online. I mean, hands up if you'd ever even heard of Zoom in January, but now for most of us, we're using Zoom or Microsoft Teams numerous times every day, and it's become part of life both for business and pleasure, massively cutting the need, obviously, to travel near or far. The Zoom app was downloaded 2.13 million times on just the 23rd of March alone. So, as we now know, it's possible to do a meeting with scores of people without moving from your front room, like lots of us are this morning, or indeed do a quiz night, a book club, an exercise club, or drinks with friends even. So all those journeys that we'd have had to make have now gone from our lives. The second thing I'd say is that people have adopted a different work-life balance, and millions of people are now used to working from home and really like it. In some cases, some of us not so sure, but in lots of cases, people really like it. So it's questionable what business life will look like in future. And many experts are predicting flexible working is here to stay, and thousands of employers are likely to use less office space as a result. So another upshot of that is that people have been spending more time in their local environments, and there's been a huge upsurge of community spirit. Gabrielle Lieberman, a director of trends for research organisation Mintel, told us that Good Housekeeping focus has shifted from the individual to the collective, kicking off a renewed communal spirit that will persist long after lockdown. Now, that communal spirit means a keen collective interest in neighbourhoods and concern for protecting both their people and local environments. You quoted from the article that Chris Packham wrote for us earlier on about how pollution dropped dramatically during the first lockdown, and how there was a huge engagement with nature across the population, and that sense that many of us have almost literally looked up from our screens and our day lives, and we've noticed the nature in the areas where we live. The other things worth mentioning very briefly are the behaviours and interests within families and households. And what we've seen is a huge change around food and meal times particularly, and also hobbies. So whereas in the past, in a busy family, everyone would tend to eat at different times on the hoof, this year meal times have really become more important, with connections around the table and more interest in the food we eat. Research by the environmental charity Hubbub found that this year 9 in 10 of us have changed the way we eat. 57% of us have begun valuing food more during the first lockdown, and a third saying they're supporting smaller local businesses than before, and 90% saying they'll continue to do that moving forward. Hubbub also found there's been a huge surge of interest among consumers wanting to know more about growing their own food, something incidentally we saw with the extraordinary sales of our own Good Housekeeping gardening collection that came out in the spring, which included a section on grow your own. We published that, to be fair, as a bit of a punt, but it literally flew off the shelves, so it's now going to form a regular part of our publishing schedule moving forward. Finally, I'll just very briefly mention the surge of interest in all sorts of hands-on creative hobbies. Grow your own obviously being one, which Louise will talk more about shortly, but also anything else that's given us a feeling of making something, be that baking. And a fun stat here, searches for bread makers on our goodhousekeeping.com/UK site were up 2,000% during the first lockdown, as many people wanted to make their own bread. But also things like painting, pottery, knitting and the like. So instead of simply watching TV to unwind, consumers have wanted this sense of using their leisure time creatively.
Fantastic. So based on how people's patterns of behaviours have changed through COVID, what sustainable content do you anticipate being most desired in 2021?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think the interest in sustainability goes so deep now, and really right across the board through all our content pillars in the lifestyle market. So we know this is something our audience care very deeply about across all areas, from beauty, where I receive really regular emails from readers asking to know more about eco brands, to fashion, which obviously Alice is going to talk a lot more about shortly, to travel and motoring and everything else besides. But a couple of areas that we're really looking at growing our content, particularly at Good Housekeeping, are on vegetarian and vegan recipes. Obviously food is one of our major pillars, but with even Sir David Attenborough now advocating more plant-based eating in his recent documentary, and huge numbers of readers choosing at least to go flexitarian in their eating patterns, there simply isn't such a thing for us as developing too many vegetarian recipes going forward. We already have a huge number, but the cookery team are currently working on wonderful vegetarian slow cooker recipes and new creative plant-based dishes. Another area we're building a lot of content currently across all our platforms is health and exercise. Obviously, a huge focus on that this year. But we're seeing a growth in new forms of exercise, which is mindful and very much with a love of nature at its heart. So our audience are moving out of gyms and taking up things like wild swimming, Nordic walking, forest bathing, hiking, yoga in the outdoors and the like. This is a way of being outdoors, and rather than it all being about weight loss, it's about really lifting the weight and stress from your mind and appreciating your surroundings. As I mentioned earlier, we're also building on gardening content, but I'm going to hand over to Louise now to talk a little bit more about this.
Thanks, Gabby. You've just said about how much people reconnected with nature during lockdown and since, really, and suddenly we've seen a huge spike in interest in gardening across all of our homes brands, with people searching for ideas on growing their own, especially vegetables and herbs, and creating bee-friendly gardens, and buying plants online as well, wanting to know where to buy plants online and looking for the best gardening apps. I mean, gardening's always been a topic that's been of real interest in the spring and at this time of year, but we've seen a real shift in emphasis towards gardening that's environmentally friendly and also towards self-sufficiency too. And we really anticipate that this is going to kind of continue as people spend more time at home. And it's just as relevant to those who live in an urban environment and are maybe container gardening or growing things from their balconies as it is to those who have got bigger spaces and can create maybe their own vegetable plots. And also, in addition to this, people are actually going to want to continue to use their outdoor space for relaxing and kind of socialising in a safe and distanced way. And actually this trend for indoor-outdoor living was really already in place before the pandemic. But since spring, we've seen a huge growth of interest and sales actually of outdoor kitchens and fancy barbecues, as well as outdoor furniture such as rugs and seating. And actually at the moment, we're seeing a real surge in interest for purchasing outdoor heaters, as we expect people to keep wanting to be able to sit outdoors in the colder months for obvious reasons. So we're expecting this indoor-outdoor living trend to continue. And we think that consumers are looking for real innovation in this area. We've seen a lot of higher end companies focus on new environmentally friendly materials and recycled materials to develop new products. And we expect that to kind of come into the mass sector soon, the mass market soon. And then indoors, we're living inside our homes differently too. I mean, many of us, they become a place to work and to kind of live and relax. So we want our homes now to do many things. We want them to be an office and a sanctuary and a place to exercise, etc. And so really for us, blending these demands and things will continue to be a big topic for next year. How do we really kind of effectively zone our homes and make space work for us, and so we can live healthily and well in our homes? And we're anticipating and already seeing a whole new collection of multifunctional furniture come through. Desks that are concealed in wardrobes, sofas, and even beds that are sort of made for working and kind of sleeping on. So lots and lots of innovation in this area. And actually, provenance and sustainability are really at the forefront of development. Much of the furniture that we're seeing has a backstory now, where it's made, the recycled materials that it's made from, be it fishing nets or plastic bottles. There's a huge amount of kind of innovation that we're seeing coming through. Also, we're really seeing that people are increasingly interested in making stuff last, whether that's recycling things themselves or buying things that they really kind of want to last. And I was talking to actually a kitchen company last week who have put a lifetime guarantee on their kitchens. But in addition to that, they're now developing the idea of having a 5 or 10 year kind of service plan where they can go in and refresh somebody's kitchen so that it really does last for them. So that's a kind of something that we're seeing more of too.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Louise. And Alice, the same question to you. What kind of content do you think people will be looking for in 2021?
Yeah, so the L audience is obviously quite a consumerist audience. They're interested in shopping across fashion and lifestyle and beauty, but it's also quite an ethically aware and engaged audience. It's quite a young audience, so our readers are kind of 20s and 30s, so a kind of millennial and Gen Z audience largely. So sustainability was already part of our content mix and what kind of part of what we offered to our readers. But I think what we've seen this year through the pandemic is an acceleration and a kind of amplification of trends that were already there and already emerging. And I think that's true across many sectors. And I think our readers kind of really embraced the pandemic, if that's not a strange thing to say, as this kind of enforced pause and a chance to reflect upon values and what was important. Kind of early on in the pandemic, we did a special digital project where we photographed through Zoom actually a group of frontline workers and put them on digital covers, and the response to that from our audience was incredibly positive, and I think it really shows that people are kind of really engaged in kind of using this moment as a kind of a chance to reassess. And we're still seeing that there is a real desire to kind of use the experiences of this year to come back better, basically. And so we're continuing to kind of have sustainability and ethical consumption as part of our mix. And I think where our readers really turn to us and where we can really be useful to them is a kind of a guiding hand. The appetite and the interest is really there, but the content that we see really performing well for us in terms of engagement and also conversion online are kind of what I would describe as guides. So, you know, best sustainable fashion brands, top ethical beauty products that you might not have heard of. And I think that's where we can step in, and where brands can step in as well, is be this kind of helping hand and a navigation tool essentially through this market that they're really interested in exploring more.
Fantastic, thank you. Louise, if I could come to you, the country living audience are understandably very community focused when it comes to the environment. Can you talk to how community related behaviours and values have changed and actually also started to cross over into the mainstream?
Yeah, Gabby was talking earlier actually about there being this real positive shift towards community as a result of the pandemic. And actually, I think a lot of this has been linked to retail, really. People making the choice to shop local and support community shops. And actually those shops in turn widening their services to give back and support local people. And in addition, I mean, we've been talking to some of the bigger corporates who want to play their part in helping and supporting smaller businesses and artisans too. And in fact, it's something that we've been doing at Country Living. So at the start of lockdown, we had to cancel our Country Living Spring Fair. And this is an event that supported the artisan community for 30 years. And in the space of 3 weeks, we turned around an online event called Shop at Home with Country Living. And to be honest, our artisan community, the artisans that took part in that, could not have been grateful. In fact, it's been incredibly successful, and our third online event is due to take place this weekend. And it's replacing what would have been our Christmas fair that took place in London and Glasgow and Harrogate. And we see this as something that, you know, kind of will continue into next year as well, as running more virtual events. And as we move into 2021, we will obviously on Country Living continue to support small businesses and through our editorial. For example, we're starting a new campaign in January this year called British in Particular, that showcases and supports some of the small specialist food suppliers around the UK.
Thank you. Alice, coming to you now, thinking about style and fashion, and especially in the luxury market, which we haven't touched on yet, can you talk about the evolution of your content to be more attuned to conscious consumerism?
Sure. I mean, I think conscious is the key word there, because to be really blunt about it, our audience is not going to stop shopping. But I think there is a real desire to kind of consume in a more mindful way. We lent into that a bit this year. We did, in the summer, a magazine feature, I think it was called Shop Small, and it was, oh, Small is Beautiful, in fact, there you go. And it was a kind of a showcase for lots of kind of small and independent brands, and we've now translated that into a monthly franchise. So every issue of the magazine has a one-page profile of a small UK-based brand, and they're not necessarily sort of sustainable brands as their kind of central purpose, but they are all kind of local and low impact, and they tend to be kind of passion projects for one or two or a few people. So they're kind of very mindful about the way they produce and what they're producing, and kind of attract consumers who that appeals to. But I think it's not always about kind of looking to what's new and different. Our heritage is as a luxury fashion magazine, and I think luxury has a lot to say in this conversation, because their values already chime with kind of more mindful consumption. So it's about quality, craftsmanship, longevity, and obviously, unless you're a billionaire, if you're going to buy a Chanel handbag or a Cartier watch, that's a purchase that you're going to take really seriously. You're going to think about it. Once you've made that purchase, that item is going to be treasured by you. You're going to wear it a lot. You're going to really look after it. You're going to take the trouble to kind of get it repaired when it starts to wear out. And when you've finished with it, you're not just going to chuck it in the bin. You'll resell it, or you'll pass it on to someone else who's going to look after it just as well. So I think although luxury might not be your first thought when you think of sustainability or ethical consumption, there's a lot that those brands kind of can say in that area, because those values are already inherent in what they're doing. Indeed,
and that's the thing, kind of that consumption is still continuing. At Hearst UK, we've had an incredible 2020 with an uplift of 294% from e-commerce generated by editorial content, which shows obviously the power we've got, but it also gives a really strong wealth of data on kind of those products and the audiences. And I know Good Housekeeping is the biggest e-commerce platform that we have at Hearst. So Gabby, could you first talk about what sustainable products we're seeing the highest demand for, and if that's kind of changed at all through kind of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. We see people are making very eco-friendly choices when they're shopping through Good Housekeeping articles. So an analysis, just to give you some data of our top 20 bestsellers on Amazon, which allows us to see the exact products that were bought, shows this really clearly. So from the 3 months from August to the end of October, among the top 20, we had things like tea advent calendars made with biodegradable tea bags. We had reusable cotton pads for makeup removal. We sold hundreds of recycling bins from an article we ran about how to recycle in a more eco-friendly way. Eco-friendly mops, very glamorous item. We're selling loads of those. And interestingly, from an article we ran on Sir David Attenborough's new book, A Life on Our Planet, we also sold scores and scores and scores of that book, with people linking through once they'd read our article about it, rather than just going to Amazon direct. They actually did buy that following our recommendation. So it really goes right across the board.
Fantastic. And Louise, we've all been spending kind of lots more time in our homes recently. Have you seen a greater demand for sustainability in the design of our homes and our spaces?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing actually from a sustainability perspective is that there's a real growing number of people who like the idea of renting, not buying stuff. So we're seeing a growth in this trend of furniture rental. So you can kind of create a stylish home that you can kind of really change when you want to. So, this is really sustainable in terms of shopping. And it's a trend really that came from the fashion industry. As is often the case, interiors follows what happens in the fashion industry, but we're seeing this as something that's really been growing fast.
Yeah, indeed. And it's really interesting that you say kind of homes is following the fashion industry and taking inspiration from there. Alice, can you talk to how the fashion world is ever evolving in this area?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm finding really interesting is how tech is enabling this and kind of accelerating this pace of change. Obviously, you can think of the usual examples, kind of challenger brands and direct-to-consumer brands, the kind of things that you might see pop up as an ad in your Instagram feed. But also, as Louise was saying, that this kind of rental, vintage, and resale market is really being fueled by tech, because 10 or 15 years ago, if you wanted to shop for vintage or secondhand luxury, you probably have to go to a specific shop, probably in a big city, and then just trust your luck on the day that you found something you liked. But now, because of the tech platforms that are available, the markets are much bigger for sellers and buyers, and you have a customer experience that's really similar to what you would get from a mainstream brand. So you have great choice, really competitive prices, really appealing products, a great user experience, and really good fulfillment. So it's enabling a kind of more ethical and more sustainable type of consumption, which is still a very similar and familiar shopping experience to consumers.
Indeed, thank you. So Gabby, can we kind of pivot now and talk about the power of the Hearst Institute and our Getting Greener accreditation? Because we know kind of our endorsements are really strong. What sustainable features and processes are we seeing growth in that clients want?
Yeah, just very brief bit of background on Getting Greener. We're really proud of this because it actually started as an editorial initiative. It was a way for us in editorial, through our articles, to be recognising businesses which were taking steps to become more sustainable. So it came from our group beauty director, Eve Cameron, who came up with the idea, but really it's gained so much traction with businesses. The accreditation team are now offering it as part of our suite of endorsements commercially, and there's enormous and growing interest in it from brands coming to us and looking to get their products and services recognised for sustainable initiatives. So the sectors where there's lots of interest currently is, beauty is very big, as well as things like mattresses, bed linens, household cleaning products. A lot of companies coming to us for us to highlight sustainable packaging. So we're endorsing a lot of packaging initiatives currently. And since COVID, really, we have seen a huge emphasis on businesses wanting us to test their carbon footprint. Currently, lots of conversations around carbon neutral brands and the steps that businesses are taking to get there. And that's everything from, L'Occitane skincare to Good Energy, an energy provider that's 100% renewable energy, Benson's for beds, and so on. I mean, it goes really right across the whole gamut.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we're almost out of time, so we'll come to final thoughts. How do you think that brands can credibly join the conversation and engage with consumers on sustainability? I'll come to you first, Louise.
Well, just briefly, I think it's really all about doing it with integrity and sort of showing and not telling. It's in what you do and not, not in what you say. So it's incredibly important to do everything with integrity and authenticity.
Fantastic, thank you. Alice, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the key word for me would be convergence. I think we're seeing the end of sustainability as a kind of separate track. So now brands that can kind of really speak to the customer experience and the kind of offer that the mainstream and mass market has traditionally given, and also encompass sustainability too, they're the people who are going to win, I think.
Fantastic. Gabby, final word?
Yeah, here to all of that. I think it's all about authenticity. I think the businesses that do this for real will ultimately win, because everybody cares about sustainability now, and it's only going to grow. So do it, and do it authentically.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gabby, Louise and Alice, for your insight into this incredibly important topic. I'm sure you've imparted lots of useful information for those listening in. We won't unfortunately have time to answer your questions now, as we've run out of time. But as mentioned earlier, we will respond to those that have been submitted. So it's just to say thank you. Thank you to all the attendees. You will receive this email after the session, which will direct you to download an infographic containing key trends which have been emerging and growing through COVID, as well as a video that showcases more of a selection of Hearst sustainability content. And obviously, we're more than happy to discuss further with you how we can assist you on your sustainability agendas with obviously our portfolio of Hearst solutions, including that Getting Greener accreditation. So thank you from Hearst to everyone who joined. We hope it's been food for thought as we all consider our impact on the planet. Thank you.